So one of the issues that we have is that if monsters are slower than the player, then combat is optional. And like, I don't think that that kind of gameplay is good.
All right. So my Lightning Roa Ranger build has just had its endgame bossing DPS boosted by about 30% in the latest patch, and received a quality of life buff for the Lightning Arrow's chaining capability. Following this very significant overall increase in power, along with some alterations to the passive tree and breakthroughs in the gearing for the build, I can now say with confidence that the build is not only a top 5 contender for speed farming maps, but it's also scalable into completing pinnacle content. With all of these new developments, I thought it'd be appropriate to bring you guys a quick update on the build, and while I'm at it, answer your frequently asked questions about it. For the skill section of this video, I'm going to be going over every skill and support gem briefly, but I'm going to be focusing on what's changed since the last video and the swaps that we're going to be using against pinnacle bosses to give us an edge over our new normal mapping setup. If you want a more detailed overview of the build skill selection, check out the previous leveling and endgame guides listed in the description of this one. So, the biggest change we're making is going to be removing Scattershot from Lightning Rod and from our build entirely. Once you've gotten your third ascendancy and have a bow with an extra arrow, whether that be because it's a dual string, Gemini bow, or because it has a suffix with an extra arrow. We're doing this because while we do multiply the damage we're dealing with Lightning Rod by the number of rods we have deployed, the 35% cut to Lightning Rod's base damage output is starting to become a detriment to our bossing DPS, especially when we could instead be boosting the damage with a different support, and our attack speed is really starting to come online. So we're taking Primal Armament away from Lightning Arrow and putting it on Lightning Rod. With this setup, we'll be dealing more damage overall, regardless of how many rods we have deployed. We'll get them out faster without the attack speed malice, and we'll still be able to scale the number of rods deployed up to 20 regardless, greatly improving our overall DPS potential against bosses. This is especially true because bosses give us more than enough time to set up 20 rods below them before the fight even begins, whether we use Scattershot or not. And this is only not true against the Delirium bosses during the Simulacrum, who spawn in and begin attacking immediately instead of giving you a supervillain monologue. Now, this is going to fundamentally change our optimal bossing rotation and opener, so let's break it down step by step. Against pinnacle bosses or difficult bosses in general, lay down 20 rods before they become active. This will take 7 casts total. Use Barrage before the boss becomes active, and the moment they become active, mark them with Voltaic Mark, then fire your barrage of lightning arrows to start the fight with a huge burst of damage. Your rods will have 5 more activations before they expire, as each rod can only be activated a total of 8 times. So continue to fire 5 more lightning arrows. If you make it this far, or the boss moves during this time, try to keep as close to 20 lightning rods under the boss as possible. Then barrage lightning arrows into the boss, followed by 5 more casts of lightning arrow to detonate. Repeat in this manner while maintaining your voltaic mark until the boss goes down for optimal DPS. So, what are we filling Lightning Arrow with if we're taking away Primal Armament? We're slotting in Ambush, which sets Lightning Arrow's critical hit chance to 100% against any enemy on full life. This makes our Lightning Arrow extremely consistent at its most important job, one-shotting everything smaller than a rare, and even rares if you're strong enough. Ambush is, however, not useful against bosses, and neither is Fork for that matter. So before walking into the Pinnacle Boss's room, you're going to switch Ambush and Fork for Pinpoint Critical and Heft, which will otherwise be sitting in our bow shot for convenience or just in your inventory when you're going out to a Pinnacle encounter. Importantly, this doesn't increase the mana cost of Lightning Arrow very much either when bossing, something I know some of you have been struggling with. So, just to summarize, ambush and fork for mapping, pinpoint critical and heft for bossing, and feel free to ignore this swap entirely once you get strong enough to not care. Lightning Rod, as we talked about, we're dropping Scattershot, but we're also dropping Overextend from the build entirely, as I was wrong about Daze not affecting heavy stun buildup. While it's a very substantial DPS increase, it's not worth making it 50% easier to knock us off our mount. So, apologies on that one. I honestly couldn't tell the difference with it on or off, but that does seem to be the case from everything I can find on the subject, which is admittedly almost nothing. In its place, we're going with Execute, which was buffed in this league from a 40% multiplicative damage increase against targets with 35% life remaining to 50%. During a boss fight, typically you're going to stun them within the first few seconds. Then the most dangerous portion of the encounter is finishing them off. Dealing 50% more damage in the back half of the encounter is going to smooth out the experience quite a bit. And just going by the hard numbers, a 50% increase against 35% of the boss's health bar is still going to be a 17.5% total damage increase, which is not bad. Not as good as Overextend was, but not bad. And as we talked about previously, we're going to be swapping Concentrated Effect normally held by our Voltaic Mark in the place of Magnified Effect during boss encounters, as the area of effect becomes unnecessary, and Concentrated Effect is going to boost our bossing damage output. And just to make sure, here's the summary for ease of reference later, or if you want to take a picture, and feel free to ignore swapping if you get strong enough to not even care. All right, things are speeding up from here. Herald of Thunder is going unchanged with Enervate, Elemental Focus, and Long Shot. If you get a third Perfect Jeweler Orb, though, and you want to spend it, Herald will be your best bet. If you have 20 spare Spirit, socket Deadly Herald in for a lot more damage. And if you don't, then no worries, just socket Lightning Mastery instead. While not a super impressive increase in damage like Deadly Herald would be, Lightning Mastery will increase the number of bolts you get per shocked enemy killed from 5 to 6, assuming your Herald goes from level 20 to 21, which is also very valuable. And for a fifth support, use Reach, because Heralds cannot miss. This is just 35% free area of effect. Barrage has stayed the same. Premeditation, and thank you for not spamming comments about me saying premediation in the last two videos, by the way. Ingenuity, Arcane Tempo, and if you want to get a fourth gem, then go with Murderous Intent, as this will give Calling Strike to anything you cast with it. Not super significant, but better than nothing, which is basically all the other options. Voltaic Mark is still holding our Concentrated Effect and Persistence. We're basically never using this during mapping anymore, but it's actually become more important than before for bossing, as we'll get into in the passive tree segment. Wind Dancer, again, exactly the same. Blind, and if you have extra spirit, use Clarity. If not, then nothing else matters. If you're in a weird position where you're having to choose between Deadly Herald and Clarity, I'd personally choose Deadly Herald, but you do you. Okay, time to talk about the row amount. Loyalty, Meat Shield, and now Elemental Army are the ideal supports, and none of them matter at all unless you're dismounted. More importantly, I was wrong about Stun Threshold. Well, kind of. I originally came to the conclusion it didn't affect it because when you take a piece of gear off that has maximum life with stun buildup on your meter, you see it visually change, indicating the amount required to fill the pool has increased. But when you take a piece of stun threshold gear off, you don't see any change in the meter, which indicated to me it had stayed the exact same amount. And this seemed like a safe bet considering stun is ordinarily calculated against maximum life plus stun threshold for light stuns. There was no reason to think it'd be any different for heavy, so it seemed very strange the meter wasn't reacting. But after thorough testing today, where I had this tree man beat me up several times to confirm, we can see my stun meter filled significantly faster with my stun threshold boots off than when I had them on, indicating that stun threshold mitigates the amount of stun damage received to the meter in some way, even if it doesn't directly increase the amount required. The exacts behind the math for this are a mystery to me still. Hours of looking all over the internet revealed nothing on the subject, but the point is stacking a heavy belt with a good stun threshold roll on your boots is going to be more than enough to feel pretty comfortable, as you'll die far before the meter fills up. While I'm on the topic of the heavy stun meter, it's worth mentioning physical damage causes 50% more heavy stun buildup. So if you use a map with modifiers that give the enemy more stun buildup or more damage, that's going to increase the likelihood of you being tossed off your bird as well, and is also even more of a reason to avoid being hit by incoming physical slams. On the topic of map modifiers to avoid or that will be uncomfortable for this build to run, there are several. Personally, I try to avoid additional damage as chaos, increased accuracy rating, temporal chains, and stun buildup. You can still run these map modifiers, but you should be extra careful when doing so. And for temporal chains, if you're not running with zero portals and don't value your experience points, you can always just die to clear the curse for the rest of the map. This build is also going to be quite squishy until late league high max life rolls become more affordable, as well as the Olroth's Resolve Flask for guard. So using Amelioration Omens will help you maintain your experience gains in exchange for a few Exalted Orbs as you progress into the 90s. All right, for the passive tree changes, we're removing Falcon Dive because we're not stacking enough attributes this league to make it worthwhile for a 5 point investment, and we're also not Amazons. We're dropping Pierce the Heart because we don't need the extra clear of penetrating targets to wipe screens. Fork on Lightning Arrow ends up being enough. We instead get Sniper, which is going to reward us with a pretty significant critical hit rate boost when attacking from range. We're also removing Maiming Strike in favor of Cooked now that our critical stats are starting to come online. This is a large increase in critical damage in exchange for a very small portion of your increased evasion stack. We're also going to take Escape Velocity to help our evasion a bit and for the movement speed because it's a pretty high value 2 point wonder. Lastly, we are removing Pocket Sand and instead getting Unsight. This is going to make our blinding capability reliable and attach it to our mark and make it so enemies we mark cannot critically hit us, preventing unfortunate spikes in damage during boss fights. Making the blind reliable for the blindside synergy is a significant improvement to our lightning rod's critical hit rate, and you'll see the effects almost immediately on your bossing potential. The tree also now goes all the way to 92, taking True Strike for the Jugular and Deadly Force. And if you want a rundown from the beginning to the end, as well as the reasoning behind every choice in the tree, this is the third video in the series now about this build, and I have gone over every change throughout them, so you can check those out for now. Eventually, I am going to make a final version of this video where I include all of that information all in one place. But for now, either check back to the previous videos, or you can stop by my Mobalytics page where I've updated it to reflect all the changes I've made along the way. Also, want to quickly mention a jewel prefix that was pointed out to me after the last video that I've been sleeping on. Companion damage on emeralds scales all the way up to 20%. And because we have Inspiring Ally as a notable in our passive tree, this is now the best damage prefix to pair with our evasion on emeralds, meaning a best in slot emerald is now evasion, companion damage, critical hit chance for attacks, and critical damage bonus for attacks. Not much has changed with the gearing priorities, but I have started using Death Rush for the Onslaught buff, which gives you 20% skill speed and 10% movement speed on kill. It's great for speed clearing maps, and it's extremely difficult for a normal ring to match the clearing power that it has, but it's not useful for pinnacle bosses. Do you want to keep another ring around with a high amount of lightning damage to attacks and percent lightning damage to swap to? Even better if it's a breach ring, you'll be able to boost it by 40% through quality, and a good enough one will eventually be able to go on full time over Death Rush. I've also been getting a lot of requests to see my personal gear set, so here it is. Keep in mind, we've also already talked about how to get set up to clear campaign and scale gear to T15 maps on a budget in the previous guides. So we're talking about gear in the context of scaling towards late endgame content here. It's not going to be cheap, especially 1 week into a new league like we are now. My Gemini bow is pretty ideal. The only way it could be any better is higher tiers on the rolls, and then the life per enemy hit swapped for critical damage or 2 extra arrows. My quiver is almost exactly what you want to shoot for. You'd prefer damage with bow skills over a physical damage line here, but other than that, it's exactly what you want to finish the league with, just with higher tiers. I'd prefer to have my amulet have maximum life, projectile skills, and hold my spirit, but amulets of that quality are still extremely expensive at the stage in the league, so instead I'm just stacking rarity to boost my economy and doing the same thing with my ring. I'd rather have a lightning damage percent, lightning damage to attacks, maximum life prefix set with resistances and the suffixes eventually, but that's not an option, so rarity stacking it is. Your belt, most importantly, should have maximum life and as much resistance as possible. For us, a nice secondary purpose is giving a stun threshold to stay on the bird longer. Ideally, my gloves would have maximum life, physical damage, and lightning damage in the prefix, with critical damage, attack speed, and a resistance in the suffix. But this is the best I've been able to do for now. Boots, this is basically what you're looking for, but I wish the guy that made these would have rolled the last suffix before corrupting for another res, and the tiers were higher. But yeah, the most movement speed you can get, maximum life, stun threshold, and resistances. My body armor would ideally be a lot better and needs an update. In a perfect world, as I said, my amulet would have my spirit, and this would either have triple evasion in the prefix or double evasion maximum life, with 2 to 3 resistances in the suffix. This is all I've got for now, though. My helmet is pretty perfect. Arguably, triple res would be better than a dexterity line, and the max mana would be swapped to another evasion line, but this with higher tiers is pretty ideal for now. If you want to keep up with what my gear is in the future, as I am going to continue to upgrade it, obviously, the Mobalytics page for the build now has this variant button here. If you press it, you'll see the gear I'm currently using instead of the ideal recommendations on the other pages, and I'll be updating it regularly so you can keep up with my current set of gear. Lastly, let's talk some frequently asked questions. The first being, how do you sustain mana with this build? Keep your projectile skill levels in the realm of 21 to 24. Going higher leads to more and more mana problems. Projectile skill levels on your bow are to be avoided in the endgame for this reason. Get yourself a good ultimate mana flask as well, with a high amount recovered prefix, and you should be fine as long as you continually use that mana flask. If you want to make it even more comfortable, though, you can sacrifice a suffix line on your ring, gloves, or quiver for a mana on kill line, which will make it so you basically don't even need to flask during maps. The second most asked question is probably, can I play this build as an Amazon? And the answer is yes. You want to put a priority on the accuracy nodes that we've actually been stepping away from in the tree, and gear with a higher priority on accuracy. But the results should be overall better bossing potential with slower mapping potential than Deadeye. I may make a separate page for Amazon in the future if I see enough interest in it. Third most asked question is, can I play this build without the Roa? The answer is yes, but obviously it's not going to map as quickly. You'll need to swap out your Deliberation support gem for mobility instead on Lightning Rod, and I'd recommend using a Tamed Beast instead of the Roa for useful auras like Haste. Keep your mapping speed competitive with the original version. If you don't want to use a Tamed Beast at all, I totally understand that, and I will be making a separate variant page on the Mobalytics guide in the future using no Roa or Tamed Beast. Another question I've been getting lately, and the catalyst for making this whole video, was, how did the buffs feel? And my answer is, they feel great. The build was certainly not the best boss killer in the game before Lightning Rod's damage was increased, but if you gear properly, it's very competitive now. And the chain distance for Lightning Arrow was a great quality of life, as some annoying bosses like the Golem can now be properly chained to from your Lightning Rod pool. And our AoE damage capability has been made more consistent during events like Ritual and Simulacrum. Speaking of these endgame mechanics, you're going to find that our mobility makes us extremely good at doing both Breach and Delirium, making them great mechanics to be speccing into. Expedition is fine for us as well, and I would say Ritual is our weakest link. Recommend juicing your towers with Delirium, Irradiation, and Breach tablets. That's going to do it for this update video. I hope with these new insights and revisions, you can start taking down pinnacle bosses and finishing your endgame atlas. Speaking of endgame atlas, I know a lot of you have also been asking me for an updated atlas, and I've finally had time to complete mine. So, along with all the new revisions and updates we've spoken about today, you can also find my atlas at the bottom of the Mobalytics guide, linked in both the description and pinned comment below. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you liked the video and left a comment down below to help me grow as a creator in the Path of Exile 2 community. Thank you to my coffee supporters who help keep the channel going, and thank you for watching till the end.